collectors, and welcome to another Bossk's Bounty video, and welcome to episode 244 of Ask Boss Bounty. This is the weekly Q&A series that drops every Sunday, where I take your questions from the comment section below and do my best to answer them. So if you do have a question for next week's episode and you want to be featured in the video, be sure to leave that question in the comment section of this video. And as I said, hopefully you'll be featured next week. With all that being said, I hope you enjoy this episode. We've got loads of questions to go through, and this week's episode is brought to you by VC44, because we're on 244, and that happens to be one of the best vintage collection card backs around, basically, which is Luke Skywalker Dagobah Landing. Mine's been graded, sorry about the glare, but this, I would say, when you ask many vintage collection collectors, this one is very high up in their list of all-time favourite card backs. Obviously the figure is a little bit dated these days now, but what a stunning, release this was. And as I said, it's a favourite of many people that collect this line. So there you go, that's VC44. And as always, if you happen to enjoy the video, hit the like button down below, subscribe if you're new, and we're going to get straight on to the first question. Merry Wood Corp says, hey Bossk, big fan, been watching for years. Question, are you excited at the chance Bossk more than likely will turn up in the Skeleton Crew? Keep up the good work, brother. I've got to say, buddy, this is the first time anyone's mentioned that to me, the possibility that Bossk could turn up in the Skeleton Crew. I have no idea whether that's true, whether there's a rumour or not. I haven't really been paying attention too much. I am looking forward to the show, and if Bossk is going to be in it, then great. I'd love to see it. David Stevens says, hi Tim, love to the family. Question for next week. Would you ever want to see TVC releases with more than one figure in the bubble? I'm thinking back to the smaller characters such as Jawas and Ugnaughts who have had two included in prior ranges of 3.75 inch figures. Would this be a way of Hasbro balancing value? The kids in Skeleton Crew could provide an opportunity for them to do this. Keep up the good work, mate. David S. So I've got to say, in general, with TVC card backs, I'm not a huge fan of that. If we take the Jar as a good example, I was actually pleased that we only got one of the two that you could get in the 3.75 inch black series. I just think it makes the card back look a little bit better, the whole sort of product. It more mimics the Kenner days, basically. But having said that, of course, from a value point of view, of course, I'd like more for my money. But I think when you're looking at like a single card back like that, one Ewok, one Jawa, I think that's enough. And I think with the Skeleton Crew kids, I think they may be sort of early teens and therefore would probably be a little bit too big for two in a bubble anyway. But we'll have to wait and see if we even actually get those at all in the line, because at the moment we only have Jod that represents anything from the Skeleton Crew. Natboy129 says, question for next week. Was there a reason TVC took so long to use the barbell hips when similar 3.75 inch lines like Hasbro's own Marvel Universe line was doing it roughly a decade ago? I have deep-rooted hatred for the ball joint hips, but thought the technology just wasn't there yet. But turns out it has been for a while. So yeah, buddy, in all honesty, this is something that I really don't know the answer to, and I wish I did. The cynic in me thinks that maybe they want you to buy the same character multiple times. It's a bit like, here's Mando, and now we're giving you one with rocker ankles, and now we're giving you one with a soft goods cape, and now we're giving you one with the barbell hips. It makes you buy them all, doesn't it? That's the cynic in me. I hope it's not the case, but if anyone wants to chime in the comment section below another reason, then I'm all ears. Lamar Avery says, question for next week. What are the chances of Hasbro making Bo-Katan's Mandalorian Starfighter? So I'm not too sure about what the chances are, but I think it's something that could definitely be done. I know those particular ships, I think they're called like the Gauntlet or something like that. There's various different sizes in her armory, if you like. There's like the dropship version, which is absolutely huge. I think I've got a little image here of the different sort of scales and how they scale up. And the problem is, I think even her starship is a pretty big ship, but I think they could do a scaled down version. Maybe when we're looking at the Bespin Cloud car here, which I reviewed the other day, if you haven't checked out that video, maybe something that's like a little bit longer than this, kind of the same width maybe. I think they could get away with that. Danikin13 says, hello there, love the videos. Question for next week. If I'm not too late, I have my Cantina mapped out, placement, character layout, the works, and I was wondering if you're doing the same. Until next time, may the force be with you. So yeah, it's definitely something that I think about when I think about the canteen, how I'm going to display it, who I'm going to display in it, and things like that. But ultimately, until I actually get it in hand and work out exactly how big the thing is and where those pieces will fit in within my collection room, it's kind of hard to really sort of map out completely. I can understand the excitement around it 100%, but until I get it, I won't really know exactly what I'm going to do with it. I kind of sort of know I'm going to have like the alcove separate and the bar in one long line really on a shelf, and then kind of fit in some of the characters around it. Maybe have some of the iconic scenes with Greedo and Han Solo and things like that, but I'm not going to be able to display the whole thing top down, if you like, full of characters. So I know for certain that I won't be able to do that. Sage's Banana Time says, question for next week, what do you think of Elon teasing he might buy Hasbro? So yeah, I actually saw that on Twitter, or X, whatever you call it these days, just yesterday. And I did find it quite amusing, because he does do that every now and then, doesn't he? He sort of, when people sort of moan about companies and things like that, he kind of says, how much is Hasbro? That's what he said, wasn't it? How much is Hasbro? Or how much would it cost? Something like that. And then people were chiming in saying it would be like £8 billion or whatever, which ultimately is short change for him, isn't it, really? But I don't know. I kind of felt it was like a tongue-in-cheek comment. You never know, though, with him, do you? He could end up buying all of these companies and turning them around. I would only say, Elon, if you're watching this, which I know you're not, if you do buy Hasbro, please invest more money in TVC. That would be great. Thanks. Joby Snecker says, hey boss, question for next week. Since we are finally getting Imperial Snowtroopers in the line, what are the chances that we might get either Galactic Marines from the Revenge of the Sith or First Order Snowtrooper from the Force Awakens in the Vintage Collection line too? So I don't think the fact that we're getting the Imperial Snowtrooper will enhance the probability of us getting those other figures. A lot of people talk about the Galactic Marine, but I actually think they are completely different, basically. I don't think there's really any parts that you could use from a Snowtrooper, or very minimal parts anyway, that you could use from the Snowtrooper on a Galactic Marine figure. And that really sort of pains me to say, because if there's one figure that I want from Revenge of the Sith in terms of troopers, it's definitely a Galactic Marine. I think they're ultra cool. I have some of the 30th anniversary versions in my collection. I still display them now. So I just don't feel that it will enhance it. But apart from the fact that they might think, oh, you know, snowy characters are good sellers, let's do more of those. But it doesn't work like that, as we know. So my buddy Dean from the SWTVC 3.75 inch modern Facebook group says, hi boss, great episode as always. Those of us that back the Ghost are going to be facing the same problem in the next few weeks. How and where we are going to display it. Have you decided what you're going to do with yours? Cheers. So yes, people in the EU, places like Germany and France, even Ireland, have had their emails to say this is being shipped. So I'm hoping that the UK won't be too far behind. I think the deadline for us to update our addresses was on the 28th of November. So hopefully, maybe even next week, we might get shipping notices, which would be ultra cool. In answer to the question, buddy, I have absolutely no idea where I'm going to be displaying the Ghost. It is huge. I have no space for it, but it's just one of those things that I've got to make space for somehow. Maybe I'm going to have to buy another little table or something, put it on there with all the figures around it, but it's something I'm looking forward to, like many of you guys out there. Steve DeBursa says, hi BB, great episode this week. With the release of the Ghost in the next few weeks, are there any expectations of another HasLab in 2026 for the Vintage Collection, or do you think a 2027 release is more likely in line with the 50th anniversary of A New Hope? Thanks as always, Steve. I would hope, and I know that not everybody feels the same about this, but I would hope that there was a HasLab every year for the Vintage Collection. I know it's like a big ticket item, but we don't really get that many vehicles or things in the Vintage Collection other than figures. You get the odd creature or playset, but we only really got the one vehicle this year, which was the E-Wing. Of course, the Ghost is dropping, which is great, but if we didn't get the Ghost, then I feel that the year would have felt a little bit empty. So I do hope that there is a HasLab for 2026. Obviously, it'd have to be launched in 2025. And yeah, I'm all for it. I mean, anything that keeps the line going, keeps it healthy. And these big ticket items certainly do that. It's something that the Black Series don't have. Maybe the Black Series will be next year. Maybe they'll run two. Maybe they'll have a Black Series one and a Vintage Collection one and see how they do with that. We'll have to wait and see what they do. But I would hope and keep my fingers crossed that there is going to be a HasLab every year for TVC, so long as TVC is around. And if I was a betting man, I would say that that is going to be the case. Alex Adavac says, hey boss, great video. My friend, question for next week. And I know this might come as a weird or not relevant question. Do you know why Hondo Anaka VC173 was made on a Star Wars card back instead of a Clone Wars card back? I find it very strange that he's on a Star Wars card back when he is obviously not from episode 4. And it's something that has always bothered me. Is it possible that Hasbro will ever re-release him on the correct card back? Something similar happened with Dr. Afra 129. She's also on a Star Wars card back when she is only in the comic books. Perhaps she should have been on an expanded universe card back. What are your thoughts on this? Thanks for reading and cheers from Texas. Regards, Alex. So when it comes to the Hondo Anaka figure, that figure is actually based on his appearance from Galaxy's Edge. So if you've ever been on the Millennium Falcon ride, there is an animatronics version of him which looks identical to this figure, and that is actually a really good representation of him. So that's why that figure was actually packed in with the Galaxy's Edge Millennium Falcon. And then, of course, to get more money out of it, they released him on a single card. It was a little bit strange that they put him on a Star Wars card, but at that point, they kind of made a rod for their own back by releasing other figures, which were kind of like expanded universe figures, as you mentioned there, on Star Wars cards. It was something that I never liked. It's something that I always felt that was a bit weird. And I was glad when they changed the Gaming Greats figures to be on, you know, proper card backs instead of a Star Wars card. Will they go back and release him on like a Galaxy's Edge card? I very, very much doubt it. But he shouldn't be on a Clone Wars card either, because that isn't the right sort of look for him, basically. But with VC129 Dr. Aphra, I think at that point that was probably a Disney decision. Maybe they didn't want to focus on the expanded universe and they wanted to create their own canon and all that kind of thing at that point. We do know that since then they have re-released a figure on the expanded universe card, so it's not something that's, you know, out of the question these days, but I doubt they'll revisit them and, you know, correct them if that's what you mean. It's just, unfortunately, the way it is. Grant's Galaxy says, fun vid as always. Tim, question for next week. If you alone could choose the setting time period for the next Star Wars series, what era story would you like to see brought to life? Me personally, I think it would be awesome to get a Tales of the Jedi season focusing on 10 years between The Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. We'd see the very beginning of Anakin's Jedi training, as well as Obi-Wan's achieving knighthood, the beginnings of the cloning of Kamino, etc. Cheers. So at this moment in time, I'm looking forward to Andor, and that is probably the era that I am actually most interested in. So I'm really pleased that they're doing that. The sort of beginning of the Empire, the oppression of the Empire. I absolutely love all that, fascinated by it. I think it connects Rogue One and A New Hope absolutely perfectly. After seeing that Ahsoka episode, I would love to see an actual live action series of the Clone Wars. I know we've got the Clone Wars cartoon and there's loads of episodes and we've seen so much of it, but I feel that they could add more stories to it with live action. I think that'd be something that'd be really, really cool. Apart from that, maybe just something after Return of the Jedi, like they kind of should have done with the sequel trilogy, you know, based on the Thrawn books or something around that era, you know, post-Emperor, Thrawn, that kind of era. Philip B says, amazing videos always, and please keep up the great content. My question is, do you collect any of the Micro Galaxy vehicles from Jazzware? I love the vintage collection, but with the amazing details on the vehicles they have, I find myself purchasing some of them. So this is something that I've kind of talked about before. I mean, I just don't have really the space for it. I absolutely love the look of them. I think they look fantastic. There's literally hundreds of them now, so it is kind of getting a bit out of control, but they are really, really good. I love the look of them, and if I had space, I definitely would collect them. That is for sure. I think they're great. I'm not really too bothered about the tiny weeny figures that you get with them, but I think just the vehicles and the detail, as you mentioned, they're great. And there is some that I would like, but I think if I went down that rabbit hole, I'd end up wanting them all, and I just can't do that. Swamps7630 says, hey Bossk, long time subscriber of the channel, and I've surpassed my 5-year subscription anniversary. Always a better Sunday with your videos. I appreciate that, buddy. Thank you so much for being a subscriber for so long and, you know, sticking with the channel. That's awesome. Question for next week says, what are your thoughts on getting media themed waves instead of mixed bag of media? I for one would love getting an OT wave, a PT wave, an animation wave, and a couple of new media waves, considering they are the forefront of Star Wars at this time. To be honest, I think it is something that they already do. Not all of the time, but, you know, if we look at the original trilogy wave that I call it, with Vader, Leia, you've got the Luke X-Wing, R2-D2, and then they just bunged Captain Rex in there for the fun of it, just to mess with our heads. And then you look at the new media waves, I call it. If you look at the Acolyte wave, for example, I think we got 3 Acolyte figures. Obi-Wan wave, we got 3 Obi-Wan figures. I know it's not a complete wave. They bung some other figures in there as well, but so they do kind of do it. I don't know, man. I'm not too stressed about it either way. I kind of like it when you do get a group of figures that are all from the same thing, like that original trilogy wave. I thought that was pretty cool. But at the same time, I quite like it when you get a bit of a mix. And then there's kind of something for everybody, you know, within a wave. What I would say is it all comes down to the quality and the character selection. If we look at some of the most recent waves, especially the one with Bo-Katan and the Mando, yeah, that wave wasn't great, man. There was a lot of reuse in there, and character selection just could have been better in general. Drape Daddy says, hey BB, congrats on making it 30k. Question for next week. If Disney were to take a break from making new Star Wars content, do you think it might push Hasbro to give us some of the much desired figures from previous shows, movies? Also, in regards to the OT, the prequels, Rogue One and Solo, if you could pick one unproduced figure from each to get into the vintage collection, who would you choose and why? Cheers and thanks. I love questions like this because it really does kind of make me think about what I want from previous shows and things like that. But yeah, I think if Disney were to do a actual meaningful break of content, maybe 3 years, then we would definitely see Hasbro go back to some of the other media. I mean, they'd have to, because there'd be nothing new for them to make. But in terms of what I want from the prequels, Rogue One and Solo, one figure from each, man, that's that's difficult. Prequels, there's so many, but I'll pick the Phantom Menace, and that's Watto. I would love to see Watto on a vintage collection card and a fully articulated Watto. Rogue One would have to be Baze Malbus, always say him. He is definitely the one that I feel is missing the most. When it comes to Solo, there's actually loads that I want from Solo. I really enjoyed the film, but I think if I had to pick one, it would probably be Kira from her outfit from the Spice Mines, the Kessel Mines. I think her look there with the cloak and everything, that would be awesome. So I'd pick her. Anonymous Hippopotamus says, howdy Bossk, question for next week. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like a notable portion of the TVC community wants prequel era figures, vehicles and playsets. Hasbro seems hesitant to provide products from that era in TVC, while the Black Series has had a major focus on prequels over the last year or two. Droidica, Shakti, Ki-Adi-Mundi, things like that, with popular response from collectors. TVC had some prequel re-releases recently, but they are some big gaps that should be filled, like Revenge of the Sith Anakin and Obi-Wan, Jedi Council members, and better battle droids, to name a few. What are your thoughts? Do you think Hasbro is missing a key market segmentation? Does Hasbro think TVC collectors do want prequel stuff? Thanks for all you do. I think they definitely know now, that's for sure. I think all of the noise that the community have been making around prequel stuff, I think they've definitely heard that, and I wouldn't be surprised if 2026 has a focus or mini focus on the prequel trilogy. If you think about it, next year we know that we're getting original trilogy stuff, Return to Tatooine, we know we're getting Mando season 3 figures, and then if 2026 is prequel, because 2027 may have a bit of a focus on the whole 50th anniversary of Star Wars A New Hope. So 2026 is kind of the only year really that they can have a focus on the prequels, and that's what I believe they will do. I think we'll get some of that. When it comes to the Black Series, I mean, the ones you've mentioned there, I mean, Shakti, Ki-Adi-Mundi, yeah, absolutely. But when I look at things like Sebulba, for example, I just don't think the Black Series community will appreciate that figure, and he'll end up at clearance. I can almost guarantee it. Goreback Zoe says, hey BB, thanks for yet another great episode and your continuous flow of information and entertaining content. Question for next week. I've realised that German mass retailers, Smiths, etc. have less and less Hasbro Star Wars on the shelves. TVC even less so than Black Series. How's that in the UK? Do you know anything about it? It's the same in the UK, buddy. Smiths at one point did have TVC. They must have thought that it didn't sell very well. It was the Bo-Katan wave with the Mythrol and Bib Fortuna, and for me, I think that was way overproduced. It was literally everywhere, and it ended up peg warming bad. So they probably were scared off, and then they did bring it back for a short period, but again, it's not there anymore. But to be honest, I do wonder in general how Smiths survives. It's very much like Toys R Us. The stores are in the middle of nowhere. You always have to travel to get to one. They're never in the town centre or anything like that. They're always on a business park or something like that. And with the toy market in general just not being anywhere near as big as it once was, I kind of struggle to work out how they afford these huge premises and things like that. Beast of Viper Squad says, congrats on 30k. Question for next week. If you weren't collecting Star Wars, what other property would you collect? Transformers, G.I. Joe, Marvel, Hot Wheels, etc. I think it'd probably be G1 Transformers, because that's what I collected as a kid or played with as a kid at the same time as Star Wars. But I've got to be honest, I do like the classified G.I. Joe line. Some of those figures look amazing, especially the really sort of military ones, in ghillie suits and things like that. They just look unbelievable, and I would probably pick up a few of those, I think. After that, I'd probably look at model planes from World War II. I kind of used to like those as a kid as well. Dan Von Carr says, question for next week. Do you think Hasbro was testing the waters with releasing the new Finn to see if people would buy sequel trilogy figures? There are a few figures from the 3.75-inch Black Series and Vintage Collection 2.0 they could release with photoreal, like Coat Han, Leia, Island Luke, Rey and Executioner Stormtrooper. I would like to have those with photorealistic, but I feel it's only me and 3 other people. To be honest, if they were testing the waters, I truly believe they picked the wrong figure to be testing the waters with. I mean, that figure, the Finn figure, was peg warming big time in 3.75 inch Black Series. It was a pretty poor figure anyway from an articulation point of view. The knees on it are absolutely awful. If you haven't seen it, check out my review. But there are plenty of others that they could have chosen, I guess, which may have sort of made a bit more sense. Some of the ones that you've mentioned there that I've actually placed there, I personally would have preferred either of those two over the Finn figure. Maybe not that one though. Aqualish Doug says, hey Tim, question for next week. Do you think reissues from TVC 1.0 are done given the outcry over Aura Singh and dated articulation? Do you see any remaining candidates? For me, I think the Gamorrean Guards and Ewoks like Logray and Lumat would still be good picks. So yeah, I don't think TVC 1.0 re-releases are a done thing. As you mentioned, there's Ewoks that they could do. You know, you've got Lumat there. I was very, very surprised that they didn't release that one in the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi. It seems like a really easy one for me. Logray as well is another one that they could have done. There's other figures that I feel are probably good enough to be re-released, like if you're looking at the Empire Strikes Back Princess Leia in her gown, for example. That figure's good enough for me, and I personally would like that figure loose as well. I do not have that figure loose, so from a selfish point of view, that's one I feel that they could do. But it is a fact that, you know, many of the figures from TVC 1.0 have been improved upon now, so they can't really go back to any of the Vaders. We've got better Vaders. They can't go back to any of the Troopers or clones. We've got better versions of those now. So the amount of figures that they can choose from is going down, but I don't think they're quite done. I mean, if we're talking about the prequel trilogy, for example, you know, the Phantom Menace, those pod racers, the one that looks like a flannel and comes with the pit droid, you know, there's no reason why they couldn't re-release that at the end of the day, apart from the fact that it probably wouldn't sell very well. Brian Buck says, question, you know the retro 6-packs, would you ever want to see a TVC version? I think one a year with deep cut characters would do well. Maybe a Return of the Jedi box with Mon Mothma, Madine, Simalu, the Last Prune Face, Jabba's Ishi Tib, and a Manaman. I mean, that 6-pack sounds absolutely fantastic. The problem with that 6-pack is that virtually all of those figures in there would be newly tooled figures, which means the price of that box set would be astronomical, basically. It just wouldn't happen, basically. But I like the idea because I do like those 6-pack boxes with the artwork on the outside that they've done in the retro collection. What I could actually see them doing is similar to what they did with the retro collection, and, you know, creating a 6-pack of figures that we already have, maybe unpunched versions of Vader, Leia, Luke, when we get that new Luke, maybe a brand new C-3PO, maybe a vac metalized version of C-3PO that comes in that 6-pack. I think that's more likely what they would do. The 6-pack you have suggested there sounds absolutely brilliant. It really does. I can never see that happening. Too much money. Alright then guys, that's it for this week's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Be sure to leave your questions in the comments section of this video for next week's episode if you want to be featured in the video. And don't forget everybody to watch my review of the Bespin Cloud Car and the comparison video of Bo-Katan there. Thank you to my Patreon supporters and channel members. As always, your support means a great deal to me. Thanks for watching everybody, and we shall see you on the next one.